Hello everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of the Vulnerable. And today me and Kimberly are joined by Casey, and it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a cool episode. It's gonna be Casey's gonna be talking about her journey of chronic illness, and yeah, we could all probably relate in some ways today in today's episode. It feels ages since we've done an episode, Kimberly. I think a good few weeks.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been a few weeks.
but to everyone listening, it's not a few weeks for you. It's about basically a week since the last episode was out, so that's how time works. But yeah, it's been a few weeks, and I think it'll be another few weeks no, another few weeks until we do our next one after this. So, um, a nice break, I guess. But yeah, Kimberly, if you do your introduction.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly, also known as your self-love sister. I have a chronic illness called scleroderma and two autoimmune diseases called Raynaud's and APS. So I'm super excited to talk about everything with Casey.
Yeah, it's gonna be really good fun. So, Casey, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Cassandra. I'm 32. I go by Kassay for short. And yeah, I've been diagnosed with autism and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And then, of course, there's a whole list of comorbidities that come with the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that have been more than my fair share of challenging. So,
Yeah. So yeah, we got your name wrong. We got your name wrong.
Yes, I apologize.
We're sorry. It just sounds the same, doesn't it? It looks spelt the same, but yeah, Cassie. Cassie. All right. Um,
I don't mind it though. I kind of like Casey too. So that's why I don't correct people when they call me Casey. It's like it's
mm,
fine.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, what would you like to be called, Cassie or Casey today?
I guess we can go by Kassay since we've gone through.
Okay. Okay. So what chronic illness do you want to start with to talk about? Because there's loads in there. About I can't even. I really struggle with saying names of different chronic illnesses because they're very complicated to say. So I'll leave it up to you, Cassie. What do you want to start with?
Uh, yeah, I guess it's a little hard to just start with one because they're so intertwined.
Mm, of
Because I have both of them.
course.
Um, but I basically had a lot of the telltale signs of autism, so I guess we can start there.
Yeah.
Um, and my mom had a hard time with me because she didn't know what was going on when I was younger. So she was looking for diagnosis. And it was, I was born in the 1990s. So it was like not many people knew about Asperger's syndrome. Like they had a better idea of full-blown autism and mainly in males. So they were like just starting to know more about the autism spectrum disorder. And there were some doctors that mentioned to my mom she might be on the spectrum, but just nothing stuck because it was just so early. And I also had some early childhood trauma that was also affecting the mix. And it ultimately led to me getting the wrong diagnosis at the age of 10 and being filtered into the psychiatric system and just being like further damaged with medications that complicated diagnosis even more. And it also complicated things because when I was trying to come out and talk about the symptoms of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I didn't even believe, it felt so strange to me. Like doctors would look at me and be like, "You're crazy." No. So trying to get the proper diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome was a whole nother ball game, especially after I had been filtered into the psychiatric system without the proper diagnosis. So, and I know a lot of success stories of people who have the right diagnosis, have proper medication management. I'm kind of a darker side. I'm kind of like, this is what happens when you get it wrong and you mess someone up with these drugs.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm so sorry you went through that. How old were you? You said you were 10?
I was about 9 or 10 years old when they first started me.
I mean, I was diagnosed at the age of 8, wrongfully diagnosed, and they didn't diagnose me until 12. And that already is just a big trauma. I can't imagine going through something like that, especially because you're not old enough to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like autism, like has a difficult, like it's hard with communication anyways.
Mhm.
So when you throw medication into the mix and you start messing with the, developmental pathways in the brain, and you complicate that process even more.
Yeah. So was it then like around that age, around 10, when you was diagnosed with autism as well?
Actually, I got diagnosed in the middle smack dab of protracted psych withdrawal 10 years later after I had hit crisis and like the meds were messing with my behavior, my relationships. I was getting kicked out of the house. I had no help coming off the medications appropriately, so I was trying to come off too fast and alone, so that was affecting me. So I was in more pain than I'd ever been. I was suffering from the consequences of undiagnosed and untreated Asperger's syndrome. And then um, I literally had nothing. It was wild. So literally 10 years later, this is when I got it, which I'm still blessed to have um, had the diagnosis then in the middle of all that chaos. Because I've heard stories of people who just they don't get their diagnosis until much later.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Autism is a very it's like um l- yeah, it's hard, really hard to get diagnosed. Um, because I was diagnosed when I was 10, and I really don't remember anything. I remember having tests, but very hard. And when I found it, I didn't know much about it at the time. It was like the early 2000s, and I thought it's a really bad thing, which it wasn't. You learn to like it. It's better than a chronic illness, put it that way. Um, but it has its challenges, doesn't it? And like it's very difficult, like you say, with the communication, with maybe understanding, maybe so if something is a joke or not sometimes, um, and yeah, and sometimes you may feel you have, I guess, really hyperfixations around different things. So you might have a hobby that you really like, that someone else that maybe doesn't have autism may think, why do you really like that hobby? And then you're like, it's part of me. It's part of my autism, I guess. So there is a really good side to it, but there is a also can be a really traumatic side to it, I think.
were you able to get like good support system in early and like have friends who were like you because you were diagnosed at 10?
I did. So not straight away. So I was diagnosed when I was in, well, I would have been primary school. So not many people there had autism, but I didn't think very many people understood me back then, and then I ended up going to a special school. Before that, I did go to a mainstream school, but I went to a school that people have autism, not just autism, they have maybe have ADHD, all those kind of like neurodiverse things. So people did understood, but I still didn't understand it myself. It took me to probably when I was diagnosed with my chronic illness, Crohn's, to probably understand it and accept it really. And still people don't accept it, and so I did have a good support, but at the same time, now it's different in education, so a little bit. So for me, when I was at school, they would put me, because I had autism and needed maybe more support, they would put me on a table with other kids that had autism and needed more support, which kind of is not helpful because they kind of single you out really when other people who maybe don't need the help that you need, they're like, hang on a minute, why is the NDA staff over there and not helping us? So that didn't really help things, but I guess it was better to get diagnosed younger than later because you get the support, but it's still not ideal at the start because there's not enough education around what autism is.
Yeah, so it sounds like there needs to be more specialized care for like people who have more needs versus less needs, because there's like a lot of positive things that come from like what they were able to do, but there was still like a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, and
Mason and Cassie, I do have a question. Because I don't have autism, but I'm pretty sure a lot of my friends do. So what's something that like someone who has no autism can do to possibly like communicate better or be a better friend to someone who does? Mason, you want to start?
yeah, yeah. I think so. With the communication. So, say if you don't have autism yourself, Kimberly, and you want to be a better person, I guess to talk to someone who has autism, um, it's difficult because you're not always going to identify if they have autism or not. Like that, there's a kind of a stigma where some people like they'll be like everyone has a little bit of autism, which isn't right because not everyone does. And sometimes I can see autism in some people, but I don't just go and say you've got autism because it can come across as offensive. And the term that Cassie mentioned, not Asperger's, now that can become quite offensive sometimes to people with autism, how they identify, because Asperger's is, I guess, an outdated term now, where people now like to be called autistic or autism. So sometimes it's really different. So for me, I like to be called autistic, but sometimes if you just say you've got autism, it can come across a bit offensive sometimes. But so the stigma around it is with autism you probably wouldn't know unless we told you that me and Cassie have autism because we don't look like we have autism. That's really bad to say, but because they shouldn't be like that. But that's a stigma around autism that people say you don't look like you have autism because you can communicate. Because there are people with autism that can't communicate. So you'll look at someone and you'll think, hang on a minute, you can't talk, so you've got autism, and that's a really big stigma. And to say you can get on with your work in school teachers may think that you know what you're doing, but you don't really. You're just pretending that you know what you're doing, so you don't get questions and kind of harassed a little bit. So really, just to support someone or just talk to them like you would talk to anyone else. I think. And if they want to open up to you about their autism, they can. Really, that's what I would say.
Yeah,
Thank
that's really
you.
good.
Yeah, what about you, Casey or Cassie? Do you have any tips? Maybe like
Yeah, well, I mean, for me personally, when I was younger, I did something called ITBS scores, and I was at a 12th grade reading level in 4th grade. And I was also 2 grades above average in spelling. So now that's changed since being damaged by medications, but that has benefited me in my autism journey. Um, it can sound very articulate, but it can be very difficult to communicate the right thing and to get all my facts across. And sometimes it may sound like I'm doing it effectively, but I'm not always doing that. Actually doing it, because like I'm so good at being able to make it look like I'm doing it, but then you might find out somewhere down the line that I had meant something completely different. I wasn't lying. I couldn't create with my words what I thought what I was supposed to be creating. And then there are times where I just can't remember or communicate at all because of just selective mutism. Like it's just not working. Selective mutism is kind of a thing where like your just brain freezes and it you can't get it out. I think it's different. And I don't want to claim this. Like this is actually a question that I have because I don't know and I've wondered about it. Is like selective mutism is different than social anxiety, I think. Would you agree,
Yeah,
Mason?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, a little bit different.
But is it like off the wall to say that some people with social anxiety suffer from selective mutism while some don't?
Potentially, maybe some people, because I think with social anxiety, not everyone's going to have the same social anxiety, so they might experience the mutism a little bit differently than someone else.
Yeah.
I think. But that's only one aspect, Kimberly. That's only one aspect of autism that we're talking about here. That
Yeah.
there's so many. Like autism is like a book. It's like we could do a lesson around it, like we could around chronic illness. Autism is different to chronic illness, but it's weird. It's not weird. It's actually I like it when people have a chronic illness and they have autism because it's rare and not many people have that. And I've only found a few people that do. But so that's one aspect of autism. Another aspect of it is, say, food, maybe an aspect of food and eating. So, for example, some people with autism, well, everyone's different with autism. So for me, I cannot sit in a room. So say we were having a meal one on one or something like that. And you were making so much noise with your forks and knives. Say you were eating a bowl of soup, and every time you had your spoon, it hit the bottom of the bowl, and you hear that noise. To me, that is like a chalkboard scratching. That's what it's like to me. And to someone else, it's hard because if I say I'm annoyed, sometimes people who think it's funny and they'll keep doing it. They'll keep doing it to annoy me. And I have to say, why are you making so much noise? Why? And especially if it's soup you can drink. So stuff like that are irritating. But on the other hand, if I was in a large room with loads of people, I wouldn't mind it because everyone's making exactly the same noise at the same time, which is totally different. And people would be like, "Why? How's that work? It's, how?" But it's funny, but I don't know. I understand it myself.
Yeah.
So
So
I guess I'm sorry,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, no, I was just gonna say I appreciate you guys' input. I mean, basically, what I got from it is generally like autism is on a spectrum, and I think you'll never know unless someone actually verbally tells you.
Yeah, and sometimes it helps if you go in like trying to figure it out and feel it out as well, because there's some things that they can tell you and some things that they can't, I guess, due to the complex nature of how it affects each and of our brains individually.
Yeah,
Okay.
all our brains are different, and they might
Yeah.
be wired differently. Like I don't know, maths. We may not be support on maths, for example, and like we have like I mentioned it earlier, but we have maybe hyperfixation, so we might really enjoy something. Like me, my room's filled with it, Doctor Who, so I'm obsessed with Doctor Who, and that's not a bad thing. And then you kind of find your people that you like that with, and then the people who don't like it, it's fine, because everyone's got like different things. Um, a lot, a lot, and I think that's part of it. But there, it's good. That aspect of things are good, but education isn't. They don't understand really people with autism. They just think the problem is, they just treat everyone as a whole, and they don't really like have you like one on one really. So it's hard. It is hard, and but that's why we do things like this.
Anybody ever like had a time where somebody will ask them the question and you can't come up with the answer until 3 days later, and then it's like not relevant anymore?
Oh my gosh. I have that. I have really, really awful brain fog. And so you can tell me something like 2 minutes and then like 5 minutes after, like I'll completely forget or I'll remember it like you said a few days later and it's like, how do I even bring this up?
Yeah,
That might be something we can all connect on. Do you experience that too?
I daydream. Like, if I'm not interested in something, well, I am interested in this, but like in a scenario where I'm not, to say, like in a class where we're reading a book. I always remember reading a book, and that did bored me. It really did. And the teacher would point on you saying, Mason, can you read this, like, the next line that someone else is finished? And I'll be like, what page is it? And it'll be like halfway down the book, and I'm still at the beginning. And I, and the reason I'll just daydream, I'll be thinking about things that I'll be doing after school or something, or after college, and I'll just think about, oh look, Doctor Who's on at the weekend. What's going to happen in that episode? So I'm so distracted, and if someone ever talks to me, I'll talk back, and then the teacher will be like, move over there. I'll be like, what for? I'm answering a question that they've asked me, even though it may be disruptive, but I don't know that. But yeah, we all definitely all can relate to that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Um,
So
um,
I'm assuming you, Cassie, you have like brain fog as well.
Oh yeah.
Did that start like when you got diagnosed with autism, or was that after?
I had a lot of like I had some stuff before, but it got worse as time went on and with medication and even coming off of it. But it's like hard to tell how much of it was medication versus like a combination of medication and then like not being properly diagnosed. So the condition was allowed to get worse because you didn't know any better and you were doing all the things that made it worse while neurologically suppressed by all the meds. But yeah, there was some that just, that's another area that like I guess at times I'm itchy to talk about is just how like when you don't get it right in the psychiatric field, how it like intricately affects everything. Like, I have often wondered like how my brain fog would be if I was properly diagnosed from the beginning and I wasn't like thrown on a bunch of meds. Like,
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important, one, to advocate for yourself, and two, it's always going to be like a trial and error. Like I said, when I was 8, I was misdiagnosed with arthritis. I mean,
mhm.
who knows what that medication did to me? Like, I'm just so grateful it didn't like affect my kidneys bad, you know? But I'm just
Yeah,
saying, like, that's a medication I was not supposed to be on.
right.
yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Um, when that kind of stuff happens, like you get misdiagnosed. Because it can happen with autism as well, and anything, and it's not good that this happens. And but it's good that you got diagnosed in the end, though, Kimberly.
I do want to know how it affected how your misdiagnosis and overall how your condition affected school and socialization and making friends.
Are you asking me or Mason?
Yes. Yeah.
Or both of us?
Yeah, no, I well,
I think you, Kimberly.
Okay. So you said, how did that medication stuff affect me in school?
with or without the medications. Yeah.
So when I was 8, I would always be extremely tired, to the point where, like, if I didn't take my nap, I would be cranky the rest of the day. But yeah, I was on the wrong medication. I mean, it just made me like numbness. Like, it didn't do anything to take away my pain. I would just kind of be like a zombie, you know? I wouldn't really sleep from insomnia. That's one of the side effects of that wrong medication. And I mean, my that is why, like, because my mood changed so much, I wasn't like a quote unquote normal little girl. That's why my mom was like, no, she has something else. And, I'm so grateful for my mom that she advocated in a time when I didn't know what was going on. She pushed the doctor, like, hey, this medication's not working for her. She's having all these other symptoms. Because yeah, like, if you don't say anything or you don't have anyone to speak up to for you, like, you're stuck taking this wrong medication, and doctors are like, well, we did the studies, and I hate it. I mean, especially because when you go to a doctor's office, whether you're a child or an adult, they use their doctor vocabulary, which I hated it as a little girl because I didn't know what they were talking about. But I mean, it's just an awful thing that I feel like a lot of people with chronic illness go through. Like, you get misdiagnosed because a lot of the conditions overlap, so a lot of them might have, for example, fatigue. And then just because you have fatigue doesn't mean you have something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I explain myself right, but
Yeah, no, you're right, because that is a condition that actually co-occurs in so many different conditions. So, and I'm so glad you had your mom just like realize what was going on and speak up for yourself and didn't just like go with the system and keep you just trapped. So did it also affect your ability to make friends and get good grades in school? Like, could you stay awake for school?
it was kind of like an on and off. It really affected me. Like, I was like super quiet. Maybe I had like two close friends. I wouldn't really socialize. But I did start playing the violin in 6th grade, which is when, I was 12. And until I changed that, my medication stuff, then I became more socially involved and stuff. But during those young years, I just kind of kept to myself. I felt like an outsider. I didn't really have a group of friends. The only adults I would talk to would be like my parents and my doctors, and that was it. Like, during those 4 years, it was super hard for me to make friends, to actually talk about what was going on. And I was just known as like the sleeping girl or quiet girl. Like, people would, at that young age, I mean, I get it, kids want to make fun of you for something that you have no control over.
Yeah.
But I mean, luckily I didn't really care everyone. Those type of bullying and stuff can really affect your mental health, especially, in those young teenage years.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that is very true. Um, because bullying isn't. I can't believe 2024 it still happens. It still happens, and it's not good. It's especially if you have a chronic illness or you're growing up young with that, and like it's 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 hard because you have all loads of things going on, and then you have that pressure of that on as well, which, as we know, bullying is hard to get rid of sometimes, and um, especially if you tell people, you feel like maybe telling people may make that worse. Um, but yeah, um, but I feel like the vulnerable side of things, you are quite vulnerable in the sense of having a chronic illness, even like the things you just talk about, Kimberly, and you as well, Cassie, with autism, into things as well as the chronic illness, because like we said, they kind of overlap, um, a little bit like a bird.
Absolutely. And at the same time, you really hit on a good point with like bullying and being vulnerable when you have a chronic illness. It's like people seem to have three like main responses. Either they don't want anything to do with you, or they're like, oh, fresh meat, we can deceive them, use them, pick on them, whatever. Or wait, what was the third one? Brain fog. There was a third one.
No, I get it. Do you think like aggression? Maybe. I don't know. That was your third one, but I know for me, growing up, I would use like the term masking. Like, I wouldn't want to be known as like the sick girl or something. So I didn't tell anyone I had all these conditions until I graduated high school, because I didn't want to be like picked on or be treated differently. Like, always ask for help, because I don't know for you guys, but like for me, despite my disability, like, I like to be super independent. That's just me. And so like I get, like, I came to a place where like I get if someone asks me if they can help me. Um I don't take it as like a discrimination or anything, but I hate when people are like, constantly telling me like, "Oh, do you need help with this? Do you need help with this?" I'd rather just ask like, "Hey, do you mind helping me with something?" instead of making me feel like I can't do certain stuff. Does that make sense?
I like that, and that does make sense. It's like, yeah, we do need help, but wait for us to ask.
Yeah, and it work that is perfect because it's perfect in anything. So you want to do that because you're chronic illness, which is good because you want to be in charge of it and you want to be like even going to appointments, you want to be in charge of what that you want to know. You want to do what you want to do for your body. And in the autism sense of things, when asking for help, like if teachers would come over to me, I'd be like, I want to do this on my own. I don't want you to keep coming over every 5 seconds, and I'm gonna get lost of what I'm supposed to do. And even so, I remember once I would ask for help, and they would do like, "Can you try that do that on your own for 5 minutes and then come back?" And I was like, "I asked you if I did." That's why people don't ask for help because they don't even know. The teachers don't even know how to help you. So, um, yeah, it's good to be independent in some things, but sometimes we have to admit that we do need the help. But we're not always going to get it, even if we do ask. You're always going to feel like maybe they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I think
Mhm.
I've had my fair share of like when I do need help, like figuring out what's realistic from whom. It's like
Yeah.
'cause you don't always know.
No,
Honestly. I don't know if any of you guys use a mobility aid. Like, do you guys use like a wheelchair or something like that sometime?
I
No?
have done
Occasionally.
once when I couldn't walk.
Was that from like your chronic illness or was that just like an accident?
I mean, I don't know. Literally to this day, one day I went to hospital because I couldn't walk, and we had all tests on me. They didn't find anything, and I couldn't walk for some reason. I don't know what it is. I don't think it had anything to do with my Crohn's. I just couldn't walk. And then the moment they tell me, Mason, we're going to have to inject you because we got to keep your blood flowing. And then the moment they said that, I'm trying to walk. I'm trying my hardest. Even if I can't walk, they're saying you have to get up and do it if you don't. So that's what I did. And as soon as I done that, I could walk again. So I don't know what it was, but yeah, I needed a wheelchair to get about and stuff like that. And I've been to events in wheelchairs before as well. Um, so yeah, I've used them. Um, yeah, a few times.
What about you,
I
Cassie?
don't know if this counts, but there are some times where I need like braces, like neck braces,
Yeah.
sometimes wrist braces, depending on what part of the body it was that I was struggling with. That's,
Is that from your chronic illness?
yeah, joint instability.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And the
Mm.
reason why I ask is because at least for me, when when I'm wearing a face mask, I have my gloves on because my fingers are amputated. Most people just look at me and they just think I'm a young woman, and I get so many stares from people that because I'm using a wheelchair in like a Target or something like that. Or I'm using like the handicap parking sticker. I mean, people just look at me like she's young, and it's always older people. I don't
Yeah.
understand why. That's why I always say like you just don't judge because you don't know exactly like why people are doing it. I'm like just mind your business and let me do what's best for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got hypermobility, so I struggle with my joints as well. And sometimes whenever I go out for a walk, I get or if I'm really active playing sport, I'll ache for days, and it's annoying. It's annoying 'cause I like doing that, but yeah, and I've been in you know because I can use the disabled toilet because I've got like a badge to use it, and I've got radar key. So I've used it, and I've been out a few times in the past, and you've had people on wheelchairs just look at you in disgust, and like staring at you really evilly. And I was like, and I said to her once I was in London, it was at a station, and so someone looked at me like that, and I think I said, why are you looking at me like that? What have I done to you? And it was like, well, I've been waiting for ages to use the toilet, and I'm in a disabled wheelchair. And I think I was like, well, why does that matter? Why does that make a difference? I'm disabled too, and I may not be in a wheelchair like you, but I'm still entitled. I know people use the wheelchair. I know people use the disabled toilet. For some people out there will use it just because it's there, and they may not be disabled. And I know that, but they can't just presume everyone's like that. Really. But what there should be a pass. A pass where you just walk through. Like airports. You walk through and you can get through. There should be that in a disabled toilet so people don't judge you. So they know you. Oh look, I'm proving the point. I'm walking through it. I'm fine. I'm disabled. And
Yeah.
that may stop that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And like those bathrooms have really good supports. And there have been times where I cannot, I'm so crotchety with the pain and instability from the hypermobility that I can like I need to be able to grab onto something and lower myself down and then grab the sides and pull myself up. And without that, my day is ruined. And I'm not in a wheelchair. I've never needed a wheelchair, but those bathrooms have been lifesavers for me at some of my worst flare-ups in my life. So it's like, yeah, no, you really can't judge people, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I had a funny incident in a disabled toilet once, and I was at a service station, and these people come storming in. I was in the toilet, and it was silly because I should have noticed it before I went in. But basically, the alarm was pulled down, so well, you pulled the alarm, and a load of people come in case there's an emergency. But I walked in, and that alarm was going off. So luckily, I just finished the toilet before they walked in. And they were like, there's like three of them, and they were like, "Oh, is everything all right? Is everything all right?" And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. It must have been the person before, or some person just done it on purpose. But that was pretty funny. I'm thinking, what you doing? I don't like people too close to me.
Yeah, it's just like, whoops, I don't know how this happened, but that was an accident.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. It's really
Mhm.
crazy. Um, but before we go, guys, because we spoke about a lot, and we could probably speak another hour about like the vulnerable, like autism and the chronic illness. But we'll just we'll finish and we'll see any last thoughts from both of you. But Kimberly, is there any last things that you want to say?
I just want to say thank you for having me on, and I love learning about you, Cassie. And I hope we do another video with you because I think there's a lot of valid points, and I feel like you said, Mason, we can go on for hours. So we'll definitely have to bring you back to talk about more stuff. But I was telling Mason I have an appointment, so sadly I do have to go. But it
Thank
was
you.
wonderful meeting you. And thank you again, Mason, for always having me. I'm
Awesome.
your self love sister at strong_self love on Instagram. So,
Thank you, Kimberly.
but yeah.
It was
Thank you.
wonderful meeting you.
Thank you. Um, yeah, we'll see you next time, Kimberly. Is there anything that you want to say, Cassie?
No, just that I really enjoyed talking to both of you, and I look forward to talking with both of you more.
Yeah,
And thank you for having me.
yeah, because it was your first podcast, so you gotta do more now. So yeah, we'll definitely have to get you back on because I was unaware that you had autism as well. So that was good that you spoke about that because it was something different. And it really connects into it all. Um, but we'll definitely have to have you back on again. Um, even just to talk about autism or chronic illness. I think it'd be nice.
Yeah.
Um, but to anyone listening, watching today, we hope you've enjoyed it as well. Next week's episode's actually going to be about autism as well. So it kind of links in from this episode a little bit. And yeah, and that is going to be a really cool episode. But to anyone listening and watching, we hope you enjoyed today. Have a nice rest of your week, and thank you to Cassie as get again. But yeah, thank you.